My name's Callum, and I'm 26 years old. I work IT support at a mid-sized company called Hensley Dynamics. Most people here don't even know my real name. They call me Connor or that computer guy, or sometimes just point when they need help. I'm the kind of person you forget the moment our conversation ends. I sit in the corner cubicle, fix their computers, and blend into the background like office furniture. But here's what nobody realizes about being invisible. When people can't see you, they forget you're listening. And when you listen long enough, you learn things that could destroy them. I never planned to use what I heard. Until Thursday, when everything changed. Until I realized that being nobody might actually make me the most dangerous person in this building. I've been at Hensley Dynamics for 3 years now. Every morning, I walk through those glass doors, badge in, and settle into my corner desk. My headphones are always on, or at least people think they are. The truth is, I keep them off most of the time. People talk freely when they think you're nobody. They discuss personal problems, office drama, things they'd never say if they knew someone was actually listening. Claire from accounting always complains about her husband. Brandon from management brags about his weekend affairs. Lydia, our CFO, makes phone calls about moving money around. It's like watching a soap opera where nobody knows you're in the audience. For 3 years, I collected these secrets without meaning to, just background noise in my invisible life. Until last Thursday, when I heard something that made my blood freeze in my veins. I was eating lunch alone in the break room, headphones around my neck, when Claire and Brandon walked in. They were whispering, but they thought I couldn't hear them over my music. Claire was laughing nervously. "As long as payroll doesn't catch it, we're golden," she said, glancing around. Brandon chuckled and said something that hit me like a punch to the gut. "Please, Callum couldn't even catch a cold." They both laughed at that. My face burned with embarrassment, but I stayed perfectly still. Then Claire continued, "The transfers look clean. Nobody's going to notice 20,000 here and there." My heart started racing. They weren't just making jokes about me being useless. They were talking about stealing money, real money. And they felt so safe doing it because they thought I was too stupid and invisible to understand what I was hearing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying their conversation in my head. $20,000. Transfers? Payroll? They were stealing from the company, and they felt completely safe doing it because they thought I was nobody. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop screen. I should have reported them immediately, called HR, told someone in charge, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way they laughed about me. Maybe it was the years of being treated like furniture. Or maybe it was something deeper. See, my father was a whistleblower once. When I was 14, he tried to expose fraud at his company. He thought he was doing the right thing. Instead, he got fired, blacklisted, and destroyed. He died 2 years later, working night shifts at a warehouse, broken by the system he'd tried to fix. I swore I'd never fight battles like his. But sitting there, thinking about Claire and Brandon's smug faces, I realized something had changed. Just before you continue to watch, please subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage and help us keep creating amazing content for you. All right, back to the story. The next morning, I had a plan. A simple one, but effective. I waited until Brandon left his desk for a meeting, then walked over with my laptop bag. I accidentally knocked over his coffee mug, spilling coffee across his desk and keyboard. He came running back, cursing me out while I apologized repeatedly. "God, Callum, you're such a klutz," he snapped, grabbing paper towels. While he was distracted cleaning up the mess, I slipped a small USB device into the back of his computer tower. It was a keystroke logger, a device that would record every password, every login, every keystroke he made. Sorry, I kept saying, acting like the bumbling IT guy everyone expected me to be. Brandon waved me away like I was a fly. "Just get out of here," he muttered. I shuffled back to my desk, heart pounding. Within an hour, I was seeing everything he typed. And what I found made me realize this was much bigger than $20,000. The emails I discovered through Brandon's passwords made my stomach drop. It wasn't just him and Claire. The messages included Lydia, our CFO. They were moving serious money, hundreds of thousands of dollars through fake invoices and shell companies. I spent hours organizing everything into folders on my personal laptop, naming them after old movies so nobody would think to open files like Casablanca.docx or GoneWithTheWind.pdf. Each folder contained screenshots, email chains, bank transfer records. The more I dug, the more I found. This wasn't just skimming petty cash. This was organized fraud at the highest level of our company. My hands shook as I copied each file. For the first time in my life, I felt truly powerful. I held their secrets in my hands. But I also felt terrified because I knew what people like this did to threats. And I was definitely becoming a threat. The following week was Lydia's surprise birthday party in the office. Everyone gathered round the conference table while someone brought out a cake. I stood in the corner, invisible as always, but I was watching everything. That's when I noticed something interesting. Brandon kept touching Claire's shoulder. Their hands would brush when they reached for napkins. They shared private looks across the room. It hit me suddenly, this wasn't just about money laundering. Brandon and Claire were having an affair, and that meant I had leverage beyond just the financial crimes. I quietly picked up a plastic fork from the table after Claire used it, still stained with her lipstick. DNA evidence, just in case I needed it later. As I slipped it into my pocket, I realized I was becoming someone completely different. Someone who collected evidence and planned moves. Someone dangerous. And strangely, I liked how that felt. That night, I created an anonymous social media account and did some research. It didn't take long to find Lydia's husband, Marcus. He was active on LinkedIn and Facebook, posting photos of their expensive vacations and new cars. I sent him a private message with a blurry photo I'd taken of Brandon and Claire's hands touching at the coffee machine. The message was simple. Thought you should know what your wife's business partner does at work. I didn't expect him to respond, but 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an unknown number calling. My heart jumped. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with shaking hands. "Who are you?" Marcus's voice was tight, angry. "What do you know? Call me back immediately." I realized I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. I wasn't just collecting information anymore. I was actively destroying lives. And the scariest part was how good it felt. A few days later, Brandon stayed late at the office. I pretended to leave with everyone else, but I circled back and watched through the glass walls. He was alone, working on his personal laptop. I memorized the keystrokes as he typed in his password, then waited another hour before leaving myself. That night, I logged into his personal cloud storage using the password I'd memorized. And what I found there made my stomach drop to stomach. Folder after folder of compromising photos. Employees at company parties, drunk and vulnerable. Pictures taken without consent. Some looked like blackmail material. People in embarrassing or compromising positions. But then I found a folder labeled "Do Not Share with Lydia," and my blood went cold. These weren't just random photos. These were deliberate, strategic. Brandon wasn't just stealing money and cheating on his wife. He was blackmailing people to keep them quiet about the fraud. And as I scrolled through the photos, I saw a face that made my world stop spinning. My sister, Ava. My little sister who'd interned at Hensley Dynamics last summer. There she was in one of Brandon's photos, looking scared and cornered at what appeared to be a company party. She was only 22, fresh out of college, trying to build her career. And this monster had taken advantage of her. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned, fury building in my chest like a fire. Everything changed in that moment. This wasn't about me being invisible or underestimated anymore. This was about my sister, about Brandon destroying innocent people to cover his crimes. I'd kept quiet for myself, thinking I was being clever and strategic. But now it was personal. Brandon had hurt my family, and I was going to destroy him for it. Not just expose him, destroy him completely. I spent the rest of the night making copies of everything, planning my next move. The game had changed, and I was ready to win.
The next morning, I decided to test Brandon's paranoia. I created a fake USB drive labeled private in black marker and left it in the men's bathroom where he'd find it. Inside were just random memes and funny videos, nothing threatening, but I watched from my desk as Brandon discovered it during his lunch break. He came storming back to his office, clutching the drive, eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. He suspected someone was onto him. Good. While he panicked, checking every employee's desk and questioning people, I planted the real evidence somewhere he'd never think to look, in his own briefcase. A USB drive containing copies of his blackmail photos and financial records. He was literally carrying the evidence of his crimes home with him every night, and he had no idea. I watched him leave that evening, briefcase in hand, and smiled for the first time in months. That weekend, I made my first real move. I sent one contract, just one piece of evidence, to a small business journalist under a fake email address. It was a test to see what would happen. The contract showed a payment to a shell company for consulting services that never actually occurred. Not enough to bring down the whole operation, but enough to make people nervous. Monday morning, the office was buzzing with whispers. Someone had leaked internal documents. Lydia was red-faced and angry, calling emergency meetings. Claire looked pale and kept glancing at Brandon. Brandon himself was pretending to laugh it off, but I could see the sweat on his forehead. The company's stock price dropped 3% in one day. I'd lit the fuse, and now I just had to wait for the explosion. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning of their punishment. 2 days later, Claire cornered me by the vending machine. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been different lately, Callum," she said sweetly. "More confident. More aware." My heart started pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. I laughed awkwardly and shrugged. Just trying to do my job better," I mumbled. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "That's good to hear, but you should be careful who you listen to around here. Not everything is as it seems, and some people don't like it when others get too curious." The threat was clear, even though she was still smiling. She knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. As she walked away, I realized I'd underestimated Claire. Claire wasn't just a money launderer and cheater. She was smart, and she was dangerous. I needed to be more careful, but I also needed to move faster. The window for staying invisible was closing. The next day, Brandon called me into his office. "He needs help with my laptop," he said casually, but his eyes were watching my face carefully. When I opened his desktop, there was a folder already open on his screen, the same folder containing the blackmail photos. He was testing me, seeing if I'd react. I pretended not to notice, mumbling about missing drivers and software updates. "You know, Callum," he said slowly, "you're more useful than people give you credit for. I'd hate for that to change." The threat hung in the air between us. He was telling me he knew I was capable of more than I let on, and warning me not to prove it. I nodded and finished fixing his computer, but my hands were shaking. When I left his office, I realized how much danger I actually was in. If Brandon suspected me, he wouldn't hesitate to destroy me the same way he destroyed others. Time was running out. That evening, Ava came to my apartment. She was crying before she even sat down. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice breaking. "About my internship last summer." My stomach clenched because I already knew what she was going to say. She told me about Brandon cornering her at the company party, telling her that her internship evaluation depended on being nice to management. She'd been too scared and ashamed to tell anyone. She'd buried it, hoping it would go away. I thought it was my fault somehow, like I'd given him the wrong idea. I held her while she cried, fury building in my chest. After she fell asleep on my couch, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote everything down in a leather notebook. Names, dates, evidence, locations, everything I knew. If something happened to me, someone needed to know the truth. But I wasn't planning on disappearing. I was planning on finishing this. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Marcus, Lydia's husband. "Meet me tomorrow alone, 7 p.m., the Marriott Bar downtown." My first instinct was to delete the message and pretend it never happened. This was getting too complicated, too dangerous. But what if he had information I needed? What if he'd discovered something about his wife that could help me? I stared at the message for 10 minutes before finally typing back, "Okay." My stomach churned with anxiety. Meeting him was either going to give me the final piece of the puzzle or it was going to get me killed. But I'd come too far to back down now. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd discovered about Brandon and his crimes depended on seeing this through. At 7 p.m. tomorrow, I'd find out which way this was going to go. The Marriott Bar was dimly lit and half empty when I arrived. Marcus was already there, and he was drunk, really drunk. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "You're the one who sent me that photo," he slurred, gesturing for me to sit down. I nodded cautiously. "I know about Claire," he continued, his voice getting louder. "I know about the money. But here's what you don't understand. Lydia will burn this entire company to the ground before she lets anyone expose her." He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were divorce papers, prenup clauses, and financial records. "She's been hiding assets for years," he whispered, "moving money offshore. If this company goes down, she's prepared to disappear with everything." His hands were shaking. "Take her down," he said, staring into his whiskey glass. "Take them all down." Then he stumbled out of the bar, leaving me alone with evidence I'd never expected to find. Monday morning, everything changed. Men in dark suits stormed into our office building. Federal auditors with briefcases and badges demanding access to financial records. Someone else had tipped them off, someone with more power and connections than me. The entire office was in chaos. Claire and Brandon looked like they'd seen ghosts. Lydia was trying to maintain her composure, but her hands were trembling as she led the auditors to her office. I should have felt victorious watching them panic, but instead I felt confused. I'd been planning my own timeline for exposing them, and now someone had beaten me to it. That night I checked my hidden files on my laptop. Half of them were gone, deleted. Someone had hacked into my computer and removed crucial evidence. Someone knew exactly what I'd been doing, and they'd been watching me the whole time. I wasn't the puppet master I thought I was. I was just another pawn in someone else's game. The next day, Claire caught me in the stairwell between floors. There was no sweet smile this time, just cold rage. "You think you're clever," she hissed, backing me against the wall. "You think you figured it all out." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're just a bug, Callum, and bugs get crushed." I tried to push past her, but she grabbed my arm. "You don't know who you're really working for," she said. "You think you're the hero in this story, but you're just another tool being used by someone smarter than you." She shoved me hard against the concrete wall. "Walk away now, or find out what happens to people who interfere with things they don't understand." For the first time since this all started, I was genuinely scared, not just of Brandon and his threats, but of Claire. There was something in her eyes that told me she was capable of much worse than blackmail and embezzlement. As she walked away, I realized I'd been underestimating everyone around me. I spent the next 3 days digging deeper into the financial records I'd copied, following money trails that led in directions I'd never expected. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Every fake invoice, every shell company, every fraudulent transaction led back to one outside company, Mark Tech Consulting. And guess whose name was on the board of directors? Marcus, Lydia's husband. The man who'd seemed so broken and desperate at the bar had been playing me from the beginning. He wasn't trying to expose his wife's crimes. He was trying to frame her for crimes he'd committed himself. He'd orchestrated the whole thing, using me as his weapon against Lydia. The divorce papers he'd shown me weren't evidence of her guilt. They were his escape plan. If Lydia went down for fraud, he could walk away with half her assets and clean hands. I wasn't a whistleblower or a hero. I was just another victim in Marcus's elaborate con game.
The following week, a fire alarm forced everyone out of the office building. While hundreds of employees gathered on the sidewalk, I slipped back inside through a side door. The building was empty, and I had maybe 10 minutes before security noticed I was missing from the crowd outside. I went straight to Brandon's desk. His locked drawer had always intrigued me, and now I had the chance to see what he kept there. Inside was a second phone, a burner phone with no password protection. The text messages I found made me sick. Payments to police officers, threats to potential witnesses, even conversations about permanent solutions to problems that wouldn't go away. Brandon wasn't just a white-collar criminal. He was connected to people who solved problems with violence. And as I scrolled through the messages, I realized my name had come up in recent conversations. They knew I was the leak. They knew I had evidence. And they were planning to do something about it very soon. I was leaving through the stairwell when Brandon appeared, blocking my path. His friendly mask was completely gone now. "Going somewhere, Callum?" he asked, stepping closer. Before I could answer, he grabbed me and shoved me hard down 3 concrete steps, my head cracking against the wall. Stars exploded across my vision, and I tasted blood in my mouth. "Stay out of things you don't understand," he snarled, standing over me. "You think you're smart, but you're just a pathetic little man playing with forces beyond your comprehension." I managed to spit blood in his face and whisper, "Check your briefcase." His eyes widened as he remembered the USB drive I'd planted weeks ago, the one with all his crimes documented, the one he'd been carrying home every single night. His face went pale, and then he ran, leaving me bleeding on the stairwell. I'd shown my hand too early, but at least now he knew I wasn't as harmless as he thought. I knew I was running out of time. Brandon would check his briefcase, find the evidence, and then come for me with everything he had. I had maybe hours before they decided I was too dangerous to live. So I did the only thing I could think of. I uploaded everything, every file, every photo, every email chain to a public Google Drive. Then I scheduled an anonymous email to be sent to every journalist, FBI field office, and news outlet in the city. The timer was set for 24 hours. If I was alive tomorrow night, I could cancel the email and handle this privately. If I wasn't, well, the whole world would know what Hensley Dynamics had been doing. As I clicked confirm on the scheduled send, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tonight. Come alone or everyone you care about pays the price." It was time for the final confrontation. The diner was nearly empty at midnight when I walked in. I'd expected Brandon or maybe Marcus. Instead, Lydia sat alone in a corner booth, looking nothing like the polished CEFO I knew from work. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, her expensive suit wrinkled. "You've ruined me," she said quietly as I sat down across from her. "Do you understand that? Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, gone, because of some invisible little IT guy who couldn't mind his own business." She slid a thick folder across the table. "But if you really want revenge, if you really want to see justice done, you haven't even scratched the surface." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were documents that made everything I'd discovered look like petty theft. Government contracts, military secrets, international money laundering on a scale I couldn't comprehend. "Your friend Marcus isn't just stealing from one company. He's been selling state secrets for years. And now you're going to help me prove it." As I stared at the documents in that dimly lit diner, I realized the game wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Lydia wasn't the criminal mastermind I thought she was. She was another victim, another pawn, in Marcus's much larger scheme. He's been using our company to launder money from foreign governments. Everything you found, everything you thought was art fraud, it was all him, funneled through us to make us look guilty. The scheduled email sitting in my drafts suddenly seemed like a nuclear weapon pointed at the wrong target. In 18 hours, I would destroy innocent people unless I could figure out the truth. "Help me," Lydia said, reaching across the table. "Help me expose the real criminals, and we can both walk away from this alive." I looked at her desperate face and realized that being invisible had taught me something valuable. Sometimes the real enemy is the one you never see coming. As I nodded my agreement, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or finally becoming the hero I'd always wanted to be. Either way, there was no going back now. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also, check out other videos on the channel. We've got more interesting stories for you.